In 1959, when the streets of Harlem were a battleground for power, race, and survival, 6 men made a decision that would seal their fate. They thought their numbers were enough to bring a boy to his knees. They thought they could corner him, belittle him, and force him to bow to the weight of their hatred. What they didn't know was that in Harlem, there was one man who answered to no one, a man whose legend had been built on respect and fear. They had no idea that in just 30 seconds, their arrogance would be met with the swift hand of justice. This is the story of what happened when a child was cornered by 6 racists, and Bumpy Johnson's legend became their reckoning. The story starts with the 6 men, racists in their prime, full of hate and arrogance, strolling through the rough streets of Harlem, thinking themselves untouchable. These were men who preyed on the weak and the defenseless, using their fists and their words to assert control over anyone they deemed lesser. They had the power to instill fear in the community, making the citizens of Harlem cower in their presence. Their most recent target, a young boy, no older than 10, who wandered too close to their twisted circle. The boy had no idea what was about to happen, innocently trying to make his way home from school. His presence was an inconvenience to them, a small flaw in their day of intimidation and terror. They cornered him, surrounding him with a menacing presence, their cruel laughter filling the air as they toyed with their prey. But what they didn't realize was that they had crossed a line. The boy was not just any child, and Harlem was not just any place. Bumpy Johnson, the man whose name struck fear into the heart of every villain in the city, was always watching, always aware of the pulse of his streets. When he heard what had happened to the boy, his face hardened with cold resolve. This was no longer a street fight. It was a matter of principle, a matter of respect. These men had crossed into territory they did not own, and Bumpy would make sure they paid the price. The deeper meaning of this conflict was rooted in the moral fabric of Harlem. To disrespect one of its youngest members was to spit in the face of everything Bumpy Johnson stood for. Bumpy didn't just fight for power. He fought for the soul of the community, for the values that made Harlem home to so many proud men and women. Injustice was never tolerated under his watch, and for those who forgot that, the punishment was swift and final. These 6 men weren't just insulting a child, they were insulting Harlem itself. They thought their violence and hate could crush the spirit of the people, but they were about to learn that Bumpy Johnson was the last person you wanted to anger. He wasn't just a kingpin of crime. He was the embodiment of Harlem's resilience, and they were about to feel his wrath. As the tension built, the inevitable confrontation loomed closer. These men were about to learn a lesson in justice, and they wouldn't be able to forget it for the rest of their lives. It all started when the 6 racists, drunk on their own hatred and power, cornered the boy. He was walking down the street, minding his own business, when they approached. At first, they didn't even speak to him. They simply blocked his path, their leers turning the air thick with menace. The boy tried to back away, his heart racing, but they were too fast. They grabbed him, shoved him against the cold brick wall of an alleyway, their words laced with venom. One of them, the biggest of the group, sneered. "Where you think you're going, boy?" His voice was low, threatening, full of authority. The boy stammered, trying to pull away, but the man's grip tightened. "You don't belong here, kid. This is our street. You hear me?" The others laughed, their voices like nails on a chalkboard. It was a joke to them. The boy's fear fed them, gave them strength. But what they didn't know was that in the shadows, Bumpy Johnson was watching. He had eyes everywhere, and he had heard about the incident from one of his trusted informants. His rage simmered, but he stayed calm, calculating. The boy was just one of many, but to Bumpy, this was a personal attack on the honor of Harlem. He didn't rush in. He didn't burst onto the scene, guns blazing. Bumpy knew better than that. Instead, he waited. Every moment the racists spent tormenting the child was a moment that sealed their fate further. Bumpy was in control. He always was. When Bumpy heard the news, his face betrayed nothing. He didn't speak for a while, just let the words of the informant sink in. Then he turned, looking out the window of his brownstone, his eyes narrowing as he processed the information. Harlem wasn't just his turf, it was his home, his responsibility, and anyone who thought they could tear that apart would learn just how wrong they were. He lit a cigarette, took a slow drag, and exhaled calmly. "This is a reminder," he muttered under his breath, more to himself than to anyone else. "The streets may bend, but they don't break." He wasn't angry. He was calculating. This wasn't the first time someone had disrespected his community, but it would be the last time these men crossed him. Bumpy had always been about respect, not revenge. But there was no room for disrespect in his Harlem. For the racists, their victory was already sealed in their minds. They thought they had crushed the boy's spirit, humiliated him, and, in their twisted way, enjoyed the power they held over him. They felt untouchable, knowing that no one would stand up to them in Harlem, especially not over something as trivial as a child. What they didn't realize was that they had made their first mistake. Bumpy was never in a rush. He allowed them to believe they were safe, to let their guard down. While they bragged about their success and laughed at the helpless child, Bumpy was quietly preparing. He gathered his men, carefully planning every detail, like a chess master waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He understood the importance of timing, and he knew that patience was key. As the sun set on the day the racists humiliated the boy, the community remained silent, but everyone knew something was about to change. Bumpy wasn't just watching, he was waiting. The trap had been set. Bumpy's men gathered near the alleyway where the racists had cornered the boy, blending into the surroundings like shadows in the night. They moved with quiet purpose, ensuring that everything was in place for Bumpy's entrance. The racists were still in the bar, celebrating their false victory, thinking that they had won. Bumpy, however, was a man of action, and his action was always deliberate. He arrived quietly, dressed in his signature attire, sharp, dignified, and commanding. His presence alone was enough to turn heads and make people take notice. This wasn't just a man. This was Bumpy Johnson, the king of Harlem, and he was about to make sure these 6 men would never forget the meaning of respect. It was 9 p.m., the air cool and crisp as the racists left the bar, their laughter still echoing from within. They were drunk, gloating over their victory, and none of them noticed the shadows that surrounded them. They stepped out onto the sidewalk, their eyes glazed with arrogance, completely unaware of the storm that had been quietly gathering around them. That was when they saw him. Bumpy Johnson, standing in the middle of the street, his figure like a statue of justice carved from stone. The streetlights flickered, casting long shadows across the asphalt, highlighting the power of his presence. The men stopped in their tracks, confusion momentarily clouding their faces. "Do you know who I am?" one of them sneered, stepping forward with bravado as if his words would intimidate Bumpy. "I know exactly who you are." Bumpy's voice cut through the night, calm, measured, and filled with an icy authority. "And you've made a very big mistake." The group froze, their faces now filled with uncertainty. This was Harlem. They had been too bold, too sure of themselves, but now they realized their error. Bumpy had a reputation for handling matters like this, and it was too late for them to turn back. "What's this about, Johnson?" Another man spat, his bravado faltering in the face of Bumpy's silent fury. Bumpy didn't say another word. He moved like lightning, a blur of motion, and before the men could react, he was on them. His actions were swift and precise, each movement calculated to strike fear into their hearts. He grabbed the leader by the collar, lifting him off the ground with ease, his face inches from Bumpy's. "You think you can disrespect the people of Harlem? You think you can scare a child and get away with it?" The others tried to move, but Bumpy's men were already on them, blocking their escape. There was no way out. They were trapped in the street, their bravado evaporating like mist in the cold night air. Bumpy's eyes locked onto theirs, and for the first time, they saw something that made them tremble: respect. It wasn't just fear of the man standing before them. It was the fear of knowing that their actions had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The leader, now shaking, stammered, "Please, we didn't know." "We didn't know who he was?" "You didn't have to know who I was to know what you did was wrong," Bumpy interrupted, his voice a low growl. He dropped the man to the ground with a brutal shove, the thud of his body against the pavement echoing through the street. "But you'll know now." Bumpy stood tall, his figure like an immovable force. He looked down at the men, who were now on their knees, their arrogance broken, their pride shattered. The boy they had cornered watched from the shadows, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and disbelief. He had seen the world change in front of him, and in that moment, he knew that Harlem wasn't just a place. It was a people. And Bumpy Johnson was its protector. One by one, Bumpy made them bow, not just in submission, but in acknowledgement of what they had done. He forced them to apologize to the boy, to take responsibility for the terror they had tried to impose. His actions were not about violence, but about making them understand the true weight of their disrespect. By the end of it, they were broken, not physically, but mentally. They had been humbled, forced to confront the consequences of their actions in the most public way possible. The boy stood there, his head held high, a symbol of the strength that Bumpy had protected in him. In just 30 seconds, Bumpy had turned the tables, showing the racists that power doesn't lie in numbers or intimidation. It lies in respect and honor. In the days that followed, the story of what happened on that street corner spread like wildfire through Harlem. The 6 men were never seen in the neighborhood again. Word had spread, and they were forced to leave, knowing that in Harlem, respect wasn't given. It was earned. Their defeat wasn't just a physical one. It was a moral defeat, one that would follow them for the rest of their lives. Bumpy's actions didn't just end with these 6 men. They served as a reminder to everyone in Harlem. Disrespect would not be tolerated, and justice would come swiftly. The community's faith in their protector was solidified, and Bumpy's legend grew even larger. If this story hit you, smash that subscribe button. We're telling the Bumpy Johnson story's history forgot. The moments that made him a legend. The code that made him untouchable. Drop a like if you think Bumpy was the smartest man in Harlem. And in the comments, what would you have done if you were Bumpy Johnson? More legendary stories coming next day. Don't miss it.